Saturday.
This is Saturday. I have that on good advice, which is not our normal day, Pat. We're getting very slack here.
No,
Very, very
yes.
slack. We'll have to stop going over that.
Jude, what was it said yesterday, Jude? Due to technical difficulties,
Oh, yeah.
the technical difficulties were in my end. I couldn't sort it out. My son sorted it out in about 1/10 of a second. That's how good I am at computers.
You didn't mention all the bad words you used before you went to your
No,
son.
I certainly did not.
Anyway, let's get down to business here because there's a lot of business to be done. As you know, Chris Heaton-Harris is busy telling us that things are looking well because he's met with Jeffrey Donaldson. And he says it was, I don't know, was it a good meeting he said it was, or was it a goodish meeting, or what?
He said good progress had been made. But here's the thing, Jude. Nobody else can see where the good progress is. I think Sinn Féin are basically pissed off. The SDLP don't seem to see much. Doug Beattie didn't seem to be jumping over, and neither did the Alliance Party. But Chris Heaton-Harris came out and said good progress had been made. Now, Jude, I'll ask you the question: where do you see the progress that has been made? And in fact, most of the pundits on both BBC and UDV over the weekend are suggesting that it won't be back in September. I mean, it could be late in October, November, if at all.
That's right. Well, if he says there's only one kind of progress could be made, right? And that is that the DUP agrees to go into the executive. It's a binary thing. You either do or you don't. And this idea of progress is for the birds. How can you progress in between yes or no? Did he give him a maybe? I might go back into the executive. Yeah. So it's as if Jeffrey Donaldson wants to have somebody hold his hand and somebody tippy-toe in with him, if he ever goes back to the executive. There are some who say that Jeffrey Donaldson's a kind of a prisoner of his own right, the right wing of the DUP. And then, of course, behind that is Jim Allister. I think there's a danger of overdoing that and seeing Jeffrey as being kind of a liberal or a soft unionist.
Yeah.
Jeffrey and Arlene left the UUP because they weren't hardline enough and joined the DUP, which wasn't prepared to sign up to the Good Friday Agreement. So don't underestimate the extent to which Jeffrey's a diehard. I've said this before, but I think what'll happen is that he'll be given some kind of concession. It'll maybe amount to nothing, because I don't think it'll be able to change the border thing in the REC. They're given something, money or something, and he'll be able to claim, look, we got this. And if we hadn't stood up firm, we wouldn't have got this. So they'll do that, and then they'll go back in September, October. Now, you said some people said they wouldn't go in. What did they give a reason for that, or did they just say they didn't see it happening?
No, just basically pessimism. They said they can't see what's changed. Jude, let's get this. A couple of things here. The executive hasn't sat for basically 18 months. The DUP's position, if anything, is hardened rather than softened, as far as I can see. They're now demanding some sort of legislation to ensure or to secure, the Northern Ireland's position as a wholesome part of the overall whole. Of maybe that's an expression I shouldn't use, of the UK.
Yeah.
And I would like to know what sort of legislation they think they're going to get. Now, apparently they gave an 18-page document to Heaton-Harris on Thursday with how they see this all developing. Now, Jude, there are a couple of things come to mind. They should share that 18-page document with the rest of us for starters.
Exactly.
And so we all can see. And if there's anything in it, Jude, seems to be some sort of premise that the DUP can, all the cards are in the hands of the DUP in regard to Stormont. If they pull a stunt where they're going to insist on certain things that the nationalist community will find unpalatable, you could find Stormont not coming back. And I can't remember. I think it was Alex Kane and somebody else who said the reality is if Stormont doesn't come back, it's not bad news for nationalism. It's bad news for unionism, and that's the reality of it. So we're back to this sort of the DUP has painted itself totally into a corner. It's almost hostage to fortune on the people on the right. They know they need to get back in. And how did they get back in? And Jude, final point: do you see any Tory government right now with an election looming? With the, I'm sure we'll come on to the by-elections. Lost two seats very badly, and just won another was scraped through because of a local issue. I know they need all their MPs lined up like ducks in a row to sing from the one hymn sheet. They are not going to go back and redo the Windsor framework and give unionism whatever it wants. And the final thing, of course, remember we mentioned it last week. Laura Kuenssberg, when she signed off for the summer last week, she mentioned Wales, she mentioned Scotland, she mentioned England. She never even mentioned what's going on in Northern. That's how far down the priority list that the DUP demands are.
Yeah, I suppose I'm trying to think of a situation. You mentioned a situation where it might be that there would be conditions given to the DUP which nationalists or Republicans wouldn't accept. I can't imagine what those would be. I mean, except they were to say, we'll put into legislation that it has to be a 2/3 majority for a united
something
area.
like that.
I don't think they'll do that. I don't think.
No, I don't think they will either.
It
But
would not be a
here's
good
the point:
idea.
they're looking for legislation for some. What tell me? I can't think. What do they want written into the legislation that secures their position?
I think they'll dream something up. I think they'll dream something up that makes
Friday,
it'll be a fig leaf. It'll be tailor-made fig leaf.
Says it's consent.
Huh? Sorry, Pat.
The Good Friday Agreement already says that it has to be consent of both sides before there can be any change. What are they looking for that they want written in legislation?
The DUP are really caught. You know, they're really caught. They know it's unpopular. Everybody feels they should be back in the executive, except them and Jim Allister, of course. And yet, to go back in without some sort of trophy in their hand, they're going to look very, very weak. Anyway, you may wake it up in the middle of the night, Pat, and say to yourself, "Oh God, that poor DUP." I do hope they're feeling better. I do hope they're kind enough to come back to the executive. I'm not going to be waking up in the middle of the night and saying that. If they want to do what they're doing, keep on doing it, baby. That suits me just fine.
Jude, and I'll leave you this one. It always reminds me of the old Republican I used to know who said to me, the whole idea of the IRA was to make this place ungovernable. Isn't it unbelievable that it's not the IRA and the Republicans who are doing it? It is the DUP. And on that note, I'll leave it.
Exactly. Yeah. Unbelievable. Okay, let's move to one that caught my eye. Really a strange one, this. Robert Kennedy, I call Robert Kennedy in the States, is the son, I've got this right, son of Robert Kennedy that was assassinated, right?
Yeah. Is he not the grandson?
Of course, should be John F. Kennedy. He's standing, he's running to become the Democratic nominee for the presidency against Joe Biden, who said that he's going. Yeah. Now, I don't know what you know about this guy, but the little bit I read up of him and the bit I heard of him speaking, one of the problems he has is that he has a speech sort of difficulty. So his voice sounds kind of odd when he speaks. But that, I suppose you can get past that. And some people, it doesn't matter whether their speech was beautiful or not, they'll still be saying nothing worthwhile. But this Robert Kennedy is anti-vaccination. He's anti-Jew, according to the report I heard. And the third thing he said, and this is the one thing I quite liked, he said it's time the US stopped being in a state of constant war. I thought that was a good one. That was a good one. So the question is, will there be anybody who will vote for him? They say there's quite a few. Will the Republicans be glad to see him? They will be delighted. The thought that energy at least will have to be expended by Biden and company if they're going to counter him. Yeah. What do you think of his chances? Because, you know, he is a Kennedy after all.
Yeah, Jude. Well, I think he's claimed the thing on the vaccination. He said, and now, Jude, I'm open to correction, that it was misinterpreted what he said. No, he's anti-vaccination, you know, but there was something that made a lot of controversy, and he said he was certainly not anti-Jewish. He says, and by the way, Jude, I agree with him. Everything in America that's not pro-Israel is anti-Semitic.
Oh, I know.
That's
fair enough. That's what he said. That's fair enough.
Yeah,
but that sounds like he's talking sense.
Yeah, but well, he is definitely got a bit of a conspiracy theorist on the old vaccines, you know, and but then he should half the world has gone sort of conspiracy theorists on vaccines because everybody's so what would you say, cynical about the big pharma companies, about how they deliberately make money first, people second, and there's probably a certain element of truth. But Jude, here, getting back to your substantive point, the Americans, Jude, in any normal time, Donald Trump would be behind bars. And New York, his business is now under massive scrutiny for tax dodging. And Mar-a-Lago, he kept state secrets, etc. Remember the January 6th riots? The ringing up of the guy in Georgia and telling him they find 11,000 votes. Jude, any other time and place, such a Looney Tune, and he basically usurped, Jude, or tried to usurp American democracy, and people are still voting for him. So if they're still voting and he's still the main contender for the Republican Party, so go and tell me, why is Joe Kennedy going to be any different from Donald Trump? Because there's a Looney Tune facts in them. Jude, one final point, because I'm going on a wee bit too much. Yeah, one day I was walking in Fintra and Killybegs, and I met this wee guy who turned out to be an American, and he worked for Jimmy Carter, and he made a great point. He said, back in the 70s, he says, I thought, he says, there may be 15-20% of our people bigots and Looney Tunes and whatever. He says, I was totally stunned to find out there's about 45% who are bigots and Looney Tunes. So there you go.
Well, there's many of the countries done sort of daft things. I mean, all you do is think about Germany in the Second World War. Think about Italy. Yeah. There's so many countries that are normally sane people, and yet they sort of swing in behind. But I just think the Kennedy thing's very interesting. I don't think he's suitable at all. That's the truth. And I think if he gets any traction, it'll be that the Republicans will be pushing him rather than the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it sort of breaks my heart in a way, because I have a soft spot. Maybe this is sort of sentimental tosh, but I have a soft spot for Kennedys. When they say there's a Kennedy, I say, oh God, what's he like? What's she like? Yeah. Do you feel any of that, do you? Or am I?
Absolutely. Jude, they changed the whole thing of Ireland and Irish globally. When Jack Kennedy became president of America, up until that, the Irish were considered sort of globetrotters and whatever. And here comes this absolutely one of the most handsome men you could ever see, seriously bright, ideological, came along almost like Camelot, brought a whole new world, that not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Brought in, after the horrors of the Second World War, he brought all that hope and all that, and he was one of ours, and that changed. And Jude, look at what it's done for the Irish in America, and look what it's done. It's given the Irish confidence right across the world. Look at today. We're way ahead of Britain now in terms of income and economic prosperity and everything. Who would have thought that by the way, when Northern Ireland and the South separated, the North was the rich part. 100 years later, we're the rich part.
Reversed. Well, you see, the Brits talk about a special relationship with the US. I think they're finding, certainly Biden's making no bones about it, the special relationship is with Ireland, and it's not with Britain.
Absolutely.
But then again, if they did Brexit, and if they elected Johnson to be their prime minister, I mean, why the hell would anybody had a brain in their head form a special relationship with that's a state and that?
Well, the Americans are not stupid as well, too. Ireland's within the EU. And Ireland's their voice within the at the table in Brussels. The Americans and the Irish are very, very friendly, and they have anything the Americans want. They've got their, of course, they've got their own top level people, but it also helps to have a voice within, for influence. The Brits aren't in there anymore, and there's 500 million people that the Americans want to keep on board.
That's true. But at the same time, there is the odd little note of caution, and that is the sort of thing that's been happening at Shannon for the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
Where you've got guys on their way to Guantanamo Bay. And, Ireland, the south of Ireland is allowing that to happen, facilitating it. And if that was say it was during the Troubles, if you had that kind of thing. So I have there's a guy's going to go out and shoot some people, and I give him cover in my house. What would happen to me if that was found out? The same thing, really, on a bigger scale. Anyway, I still have, as I say, I must be a bit of a dreamer, but I just love that Kennedy mystique. It's anti-democratic. It's anti-democratic. Nobody should be elected because they're the brother or the son or the uncle or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But you still cling to it in a way. They were so bloody classy and so bloody rich as well. Okay, let's move to people who are neither classy nor rich, I hope, and that's the PSNI. The PSNI, we've talked about this in part. Remember the gay parade thing? I think we've discussed that.
They wouldn't let people,
they wouldn't allow them to appear as a group and wearing their uniform. And a lot of people are getting worked up about that. I wouldn't get worked up about it at all because, as I said earlier, why not have all postmen? Why not have bus conductors or bus drivers? Everybody could dress up and, if you want to be in the gay parade, that's fine. But I don't know that you have a right then to have the uniform that you wear when you're working on you.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, really worries me with the PSNI. And this is when you're sort of saying, are they doing a good job? They are talking. They are talking to, in one way or another, the UDA about how can we stem this drug problem and our drug war, essentially saying these guys will help us or we'll help them to eradicate this problem in their society or in their community. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, supposing they said, "Oh, we're meeting the IRA up in West Belfast. They're going to help us to do the drug thing." But I guess that makes sense. Do you think?
I've never seen. Remember, absolutely. Remember, Matthew O'Toole got into a bother with Nolan when he talked about the Loyalist Community Council. I keep thinking, can you imagine if it was the other way around? If somebody went on and said, "Look, I've just been speaking. I'm speaking on behalf of the IRA, the real IRA, and whatever you're having yourself, IRA." Can you imagine the absolute outrage from the establishment media and from the unionist population? Yet it seems to be no big bother at all when it's the Loyalist Community Council. Right, let's move on. I saw a guy on BBC last night when he was asked, was he a member of the real UVF or UFF? He says, "I'm not answering that." It's live on air, So, Jude, it seems the police know all these guys, know who they are, etc., 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 and they seem to be wanting to cooperate with them. Jude, surely these guys should be arrested. If any Republican was openly shooting, drug dealing, loan sharking, you can imagine that right away. Every Sir Geoffrey and Jim Allister saying, "Look at those Republican criminals there. The police are doing nothing about openly drug dealing, openly this and openly that." And yet it's happening in the Loyalist community. And the police seem to want to sort of, let's have dialogue with these people to see if we can dampen it all down.
It's this softly thing. Don't upset them. And that's the same thing with that you hear with regard to people talk about a border poll. They say, "Oh, geez, don't do that. You'll upset them." There could be a backlash. I think that's ridiculous. That's literally holding everybody else. Well, they got a good example from the DUP. It's holding the rest of the community or the state to ransom. We've got to dance the tune that they want us to dance, even though they're just
which is ridiculous. And there'll never be any progress if we take that.
Yeah, I agree. Incidentally, I saw where we're speaking of drugs. I saw where there's a lot of drugs washing up on the shores of Donegal.
Absolutely.
What's that all about?
Well, obviously, Jude, it would seem to be obvious anyway, that they've come off a fishing boat or a boat of some kind and washed up. They were one was at Fanet and the other was at Malin. And I think the combined total of it is worth at least £5 million in street value. And Jude, they think, if I'm reading between the lines right, there could be others sailing in or floating in the near future. They have told people, "Look, if you see anything, don't touch it, don't go near it." Obviously, they want to see whatever evidence they can find without somebody opening it up first, and so on. So, Jude, it looks like there's a consignment that came in and something went wrong. But Jude, look at it like this. Donegal well. It's a huge county, huge coastline. Like, there's wee inlets that nobody, you go down through the fields and gun, nobody ever goes near them. And unless there's a patrol boat or there's radar, these people can row in, not a bother.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of crazy. You'd wonder what happened. What happened at those? I mean, if you had a boat, right, and you had these really valuable packages, I think you'd be pretty damn sure they didn't fall off into the water.
Yeah.
Because
It could have been an emergency or something that that we didn't hear about.
Okay, well, that introduces the other big question. Here we have the Garda Síochána, and I'm sure PSNI are doing the same thing, or after a fashion, continuing the war on drugs. And I said before, and I think it's the biggest waste of time ever. Since I can remember, there was a war against drugs. Now, if the Ukraine war was to last that long, people would have said long ago, forget it. This can't be solved. We have to do something totally different. But with the war against drugs, they just don't keep it on. And we win the war against drugs and counsel young people not to take them and so on. And meanwhile, half the rest of the world is legalizing cannabis. And in some cases, they're even selling cocaine under controlled circumstances. What do you think, Pat? Do you think, I know that an awful lot of police energy goes into the war against drugs. Is that energy well spent? Is the time and effort worth it?
Dude, I wouldn't have agreed with you a couple of years ago. I'm now half agreeing with you, because let's get this clear. I don't see arresting somebody for cannabis. Dude, they may as well arrested for having a pint of Guinness. Cannabis and all. I keep hearing this when I say something like that. I get these people saying, "Oh, but it's a gateway drug."
That's exactly that's the word I was going to say.
There's two things. Number one, it breaks down that barrier in your head about taking drugs. And then you move on to harder drugs, and that's the first thing. Secondly, it's a gateway that some people who suffer from mental illness, it can bring on paranoia, or so they say. Now, I know people who have taken cannabis for years and not a thing's happened to them. But then the other side of the story, I do know 2 or 3 people who did start off and ended up, they're talking about me in there type thing. So on paranoia. So, Jude, but having said that, a drink has done a hell of a lot more harm in Irish society than I think cannabis has.
Every time. I remember, you see, when you say that thing about the gateway, I remember when I was at St. Column's, the dean gave us a talk. We were first years, like the thought of drink was the last thing in our minds. But he gave us a talk on drink and said, I would never take a drink because you never know. It's taking a chance. You could become addicted and you become an alcoholic, which is true, all right. But you can't lead your life because certain things might lead to that. The fact of the matter is that drink, if properly taken, is part of the joy of life. It enhances life, and you don't have to be pissed out of your mind every night to enjoy it. It helps. It's a sort of a lubricant, really, for social interaction. And yet people go around saying, well, you see, Irish people we're very vulnerable to extremes. We either want to be pioneers, never touch the stuff, or else we want to knock our brains out drinking bottles of stout.
That is true about Irish society and just about everything. We went from being the most Catholic country in the world to introducing same-sex marriage, throwing out the Catholic Church. What is it? Very few. Well, they get married, but a lot of people are now getting married in what do you call it? Registry type situations. The Catholic Church now, most of the priests are over 65. That's in my lifetime.
Yeah. Unbelievable, the change. But again, I come back to the question, Pat. Would you give a green light to the idea of legalizing, say, cannabis?
Yeah, I would.
I think I couldn't agree more. And it's so obvious. And because there's so many countries in the world and states in America who have legalized it. And here we are having guys going around the use of the PSNI's time, the use of the Garda Síochána's time, chasing after guys and saying, oh, Jesus, we've got a big haul of cannabis. This guy was growing cannabis in his greenhouse. How awful. Why is it?
Here's an anecdotal one, very quick and very simple. There's a guy I know, he's a bouncer, doorman. Nice fella, by the way, not a thug at all. And he was telling me, he says, when I was working in a certain hotel or bar down in west of Donegal, he says, See, on a Saturday night when the boys were pissed, he says it was a nightmare. He says there were thugs, there were bottles thrown and whatever. And he came to a certain other establishment and so on. And he says most of the guys in there, he just smoked a wee bit of dope. And they'd say, he'd go up to me, hey, knock on, knock on. Sorry, man, no hassle. He says the difference day and night. And he, by the way, that's the guy. Sure, it's only anecdotal, but this is a guy who has no agenda whatsoever. He wasn't saying but by the way, I had that conversation with him only a couple of weeks ago. He says, Pat, I have no problem with cannabis whatsoever. He says most of the people who smoke cannabis are very chilled and calm. He says alcohol makes them very aggressive.
Yeah, yeah. We'll move on now, but I'm sorely tempted, but I'll resist the temptation of asking you whether or not you yourself have opened any gates recently.
I'll tell you, about 50 years ago, I'm 69, I was about 18 or 19. A guy gave me a joint of cannabis and I took 2 drags and I did inhale, but I've never touched, I didn't touch it before and haven't touched it since. So that's my sum total of my
how
cannabis experience.
Did it affect you at all?
Not in the least. Not in the least. I felt nothing.
Well, I have to confess, when I was in Canada, my early misspent youth, myself and my friend, we got cannabis a couple of times, and it was the thing was we started to laugh and we couldn't stop laughing. We didn't know what we were laughing at. We laughed and literally till you were sore and you couldn't see what you were laughing at. And that's how it affects some people.
Sure, it's not a happy thing rather than an aggressive.
And that's
thing.
Right. I mean, there's some guys if you only could get them laughing. It would be a break.
Yeah,
that would be the gateway you'd be looking for. Put a smile on their face for 5 minutes. Okay, let's go on and leave. I mentioned the Ukraine there and saying that the war against drugs, if the Ukraine war had gone on that length of time, people would have been having second thoughts and changed their policy, I'm sure. However, the Ukraine war is going on, and Leo Varadkar made an unannounced visit to Zelensky and shook hands with him. What do you think of that? It was on TV and everything too, so it was
I really don't know. Right, okay, they give 5 million more to the Ukrainians, and we're supposed to be neutral. Fair enough. They said it was practical aid for a country that's been invaded. Now, Jude, there's something like 88,000. I didn't realize there are 88,000 Ukrainians in Ireland, which and Ireland's taking a substantial number of people so on. But Jude, the more I do think, I do think the Russians, some of the stuff they're doing now, like bombing the markets or the ports where they're storing grain deliberately to start a hunger thing. I think that's disgusting, and at a certain sympathy, I started out with a certain sympathy for the Russians, saying that they had a point. They're getting less and less sympathy for me now. Jude, I'm not saying NATO and the West are good guys or anything, but Jude, on a scale of bad guys, Russia wins hands down.
But why do you think Leo went to Ukraine? Because I have my suspicions that he didn't have to. I mean, he could have sent that money without going himself. He could have put an envelope or something and posted it. So, what do you think he was up to there?
It's a wee PR thing. It's I think it's Leo on the world stage. It's all part. There's an election come up in about the next year, 15 months. I think it's early 2025 type thing, right? Leo, I hope you've noticed. They're saying that there's going to be something like is it a 65 billion pound surplus by 26 or 27, something like that, and so on. And one of the things that I think they're now starting to, I noticed this last week, they are now finding money for everything. And the Republic. And one of the things they're also saying, they're not leaving the money for Sinn Féin to spend. And Sinn Féin are going to inherit a massive mess in regard to health and education and housing. But they'll just watching the next year. So this government spend on public services, like what do you call it? Like social welfare and stuff like that, and projects and so on. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think, to answer your question, Leo went out there. We would have grandstanding on the international stage, been seen to be out there and up the profile and so on and so on. Look, I am representing Ireland abroad, etc. It's all image and PR.
I remember what he said. He said too, he reassured Zelensky. Oh God, hold on a second. I've got to get this thing out of it. Yeah. He reassured Zelensky that Ireland would be behind him. The south of Ireland would be behind him. I find that a bit embarrassing, because Zelensky probably was scratching his head and saying, "Who the hell is this guy?" And, you know, the thing of going all that distance to shake his hand and reassure him, like, you know, just sort of embarrassing, Leo. Please, please don't
There's
do
a wee
that.
touch of isn't there a wee touch of the Skibbereen Eagle there?
That's exactly it. I hadn't thought of that. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
We're on your side, Zelensky, so you're all right. We've got our eye on things. We that Russia lot, we've our eye on them. Oh, God. Okay. Micheal Martin, his Leo Varadkar's alter ego, or, you know, other Taoiseach. Micheal Martin, there's talk about him going to Europe, him getting a job in Europe. I'm not sure when, whether it be before the election or after the election. I guess if he was going, he'd probably need to go pretty soon. And they say he could get a good job there because there's openings, all sorts of things. I've forgotten what the deal is, but that particular, you know, the way these parties link together, would fit very nicely. Do you think would Micheal be tempted to go?
Now, Fianna Fáil, they've come up a wee bit in the polls recently and so on. But the other side of the story, Micheal has had a good run. And I'm going to contradict myself. Jude, a couple of years back, there was a couple of people in the running, and Brian Clown's brother, Big Jim O'Callaghan, and a couple others. But they've all fallen by the wayside. And Micheal's been basically unchallenged this last week. But here's the thing. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, no matter what the Republicans and Sinn Féin say, if they get out the vote, they can still outvote Sinn Féin at the next election in terms of coalition.
That's true.
Now, whether that will happen or not, you know, and if the Labour and the Greens roll in behind Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, Sinn Féin might still be the biggest party by a mile, but they won't be in government. So, like, I'm sure Micheal's sitting weighing his options. Now, the other side of the coin, Jude, is a commissioner at Europe as a nice retirement fund, 300,000 at least a year, plus maybe the same again in expenses, all sorts of, and you're globe trotting, you're a big hitter and so on, and you're no longer at the beck and call of the electorate. So there's I'm sure he's going to, if the job's on offer, I'm sure he'll be tempted.
I would agree with that completely. I don't see Micheal having some resurgence. Honestly, I don't see Fianna Fáil as having any great resurgence either. And, you know, when they get to Europe, do you remember Jim Nicholson? Do you remember Jim Nicholson of the UUP, I think it was?
He never came back.
I mean, he was I hate to say it, but I mean, he was a big culture. And he was out in Europe for about, I don't know, 10 years or 5 years. And he came back.
A lot more than that,
was quite sophisticated. He was nicely cut suit and a tasteful tie and shirt. New man,
yes.
So maybe Micheal saying, you know, I didn't win. I did get to be Taoiseach. Maybe we could have done better. But hey, I was not bad at all. Good enough Irish record. Let's make some money and have some fun in Brussels. So I think it's tempting for him, you know. They also say, incidentally, before we leave this topic, briefly, and that is that Mairead McGuinness, you know, the one that did all the talking, used to be a journalist, did the talking about the British and Brexit and all that.
Brexit and so on,
very impressive. They say that she's actually going to run for Ars an Uachtaráin, because that's coming up. I'm not sure, it's 2025, is it?
Well, put it as she's the perfect type. She's sort of bland enough, but she's the Mary Robinson, Micheal Higgins, and Mairead as of that ilk, and that sort of bland wine and cheese type. You know, she'll get herself elected, no bother. Anyway, should we mention the elections in Britain, the by-elections?
Oh yes. Oh, how long we got? We've only 5 minutes left, so let's get to them now. I'm wondering if there's much happened that we didn't anticipate anyway. There was 3 by-elections, and the assumption was that the Tories, well, they said themselves, if they could hold on to one of them, they'd have done well. And that's what happened.
Yeah. But you know what's really interesting is behind the scenes, I get the impression it's not, a lot of people just don't like Labour that much either. They hate the Tories. Sir Keir Starmer, there's a big issue. I think the next election is going to come into the open. There's going to be open warfare, I think, in the Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer has basically said we are going to follow Tory policies. We're not going to rock the boat. And the only thing he seems to be interested in is getting into power. Now, he's saying before you can change anything, you have to get into power. But if before you get into power, you hamstring yourself by saying we're not going to change any Tory policies, what's the point?
Well, I part of me sympathizes with him and part of me detests him. The part that sympathizes is that if they were to make commitments to say help poor people, or that thing, remember about the two children, and
two children,
they said they would
anything
expand
above
that.
2 children don't get in. Yeah,
but they're not going to do that now.
Yeah.
If they present any chance to the Tories of showing themselves as being big spenders and not having a firm grip on the economy, then that could damage them seriously. So I kind of sympathize a bit with Starmer. But on the other hand, like, if the guy's going to kick out, and I mean, he's stopping people running. There was a guy up in Sunderland or somewhere who was a mayor, and because he was slightly left, or he spoke to Jeremy Corbyn or something, he's been dumped. He totally can't run.
He went to a function. He went to a function with Ken Loach, and that got him drummed out.
God.
But here's the thing. They're right. The Labour Party in England, I'd love to know now what they actually stand for. Starmer's refused to say that he will renationalise water, despite the fact that the profit taken by the companies is unbelievable, and the standard of water is unbelievably bad.
As Fergal Sharkey, a Donegal man, or a man from Derry anyway, has pointed out.
Yeah, absolutely. The water is now the worst ever. Right. The transport system has fallen apart. The profit taking by the shelter holders is off the scale, and so on. He won't say he'll renationalise that. He won't take on the big spenders and corporations. He has given no indication that he will change the tax laws. To pay, I know that the excessive wages of the very, very rich. He's basically saying he's going to do nothing. It's just sort of keep everything on a status quo. So the big question is, if he's saying this now, like what are the indications that he's going to change when he gets into government?
But maybe it's the other way around from what's usually the case. Maybe it's a flip. We all detest politicians who promise stuff and then they get into office and they don't bother doing anything. Maybe Starmer's doing the other way around. He's saying he won't do anything, and then he gets into government and he'll do all sorts of good things because he says you have to get into government first. Somebody described.
Yeah, I said that this morning. I said that this morning. He was talking to the national executive, and he said, "Look, wait a minute. Everybody quotes Nye Bevan about what we need to do as policies, but he says they forget the other part. He says, but we have to get into government first to do these things."
Well, you see, I have some sympathy with that too. You see, there's a lot of powerful forces, Murdoch's papers and so on, that have been lined up against him. So the Ming, somebody described it as the Ming vase policy. It's like a Ming vase, one of these beautiful Chinese delicate works of art almost. And that's the Labour Party policy. Don't be reckless with it. Treat it very gently. Don't move it even in case the thing would break. And that's what he's doing with Labour. He's terrified that the lead he has, something will happen and, the whole thing will shatter. So I have some sympathy with him in that. But on the other hand, like, you really do have to, I come back to my source of information or ideas about this, and that's that Not the Andrew Marr Show. I don't know if you've seen it on YouTube. It's well worth having a look at any episode of that. It's very good. If you just type in Not the Andrew Marr Show, and they got guys on there saying the truth about what's happening in Labour, and I just find it very, very encouraging. You have Jewish people on saying it's a lot of rubbish about what they're saying about Corbyn. So, there we are.
Like, remember Bob Hawke, an Australian Prime Minister?
Yeah.
He's scared. He decided the only way to get elected was to cozy up to the billionaires, and he did. But when they got into power, he brought on a lot of left-wing things. Hopefully, Starmer might do the same.
That's the only hope. Right, Pat, time's up.
All the best, dude.
I think we've given enough wisdom to the masses. Okay. Thanks.
Good luck, dude. Bye, dude.